Okay, all right. So again, this explains why we have to disguise animal flesh in order to make it acceptable to us as humans, because we really try to make it look like the plant foods that our brain really wants to eat. And that's what this little video points out to you, that we shape animal tissue to mimic plant parts. Because unlike true carnivores, we really don't want to be eating dead animal tissue. And so this is meat eating and mind games, exploring the psychology of the human disgust emotion and why we have to disguise animal flesh in order to make it desirable. And this is a quote from the book of Revelation. It says, "And the Lord showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, and on either side of the river were the trees of life, which bear 12 manner of fruits, and the leaves of the trees were for the healing of the nations." That's Revelation 22, verses 1 and 2. So in this lecture, we will see that humans have the palate of an herbivore, of a plant-based creature. We actually love and crave the taste, textures, colors, and varieties of plant foods. And although people often eat meat out of a learned tradition and cultural behavior, the fact is we really don't like it. And that's why we are compelled to change its form, taste, and texture to make it acceptable and palatable to us. This lecture explores what our biology and psychology trying to tell us about who we are as a species and what we should eat as opposed to what many of us choose to eat. So first, we are going to look at the psychology and neurobiology of the human disgust response. So let's ask the most basic question. What is disgust? Disgust is a universal human emotion with a very characteristic facial expression that is absolutely recognized across all human cultures. The disgust reflex is present in infants, and it's believed to be one of the 6 basic human emotions. Now, we all recognize that facial expression. I choose to believe that they are actually feeding that poor child eggplant because that is exactly the same expression I make when people feed me eggplant. The other 5 emotions that we are all born with are happiness, sadness, fear, anger, and surprise. Again, these are emotions we're all born with. We don't have to learn them. And from a teleological standpoint, all 6 of these emotions mediate appropriate interactions between individuals and the environment and among individuals within the social group. And they are important because these basic emotions serve to facilitate survival for both individuals and for the larger social group. So we need all of these emotions to help us survive, both as individuals and as a social group, because without them, we wouldn't know how to navigate our environment in ways that would keep us alive, nor would we be able to appropriately interact with each other in ways that would help us survive as a species and a social enterprise. Disgust is therefore a hardwired neural phenomenon that is an important survival reflex. Disgust improves survival both for individuals and for the group by facilitating the rapid acquisition of persistent avoidance behaviors to potentially harmful phenomena. Now, what does that mean in plain English? We'll see what that means. MRI studies of the brain have shown that the disgust reflex is located in a part of the brain called the anterior insular cortex, which the arrow is pointing to. And that area of the brain is also important in other stomach and GI related functions, such as recognizing unpleasant taste, the nausea sensation, and stomach sensations such as dyspepsia. Disgust is distinguishable from fear in that while fear heightens activity in preparation for fight or flight, disgust is interesting because it promotes the suspension of activity. So, for instance, if you're sitting in a room and something scary breaks into that room, like a rabid dog or a bear, or say, Donald Trump, you will suddenly jump up and become, ready to either fight your way out of the room or run for your life. Well, disgust is different because disgust exerts strong negative effects on your behavior that will cause you to stop doing something. And those effects can be permanent and absolutely defy reason. Well, what do I mean? Well, think about the last time you dropped your toothbrush in the toilet. Even if someone fished that toothbrush out of the toilet, steam cleaned it with bleach, I don't think you would ever put it back in your mouth because you would just be entirely too disgusted. Although you would know in your mind that it was clean and free of, any potentially disease-causing bacteria, the thought of putting it in your mouth would be so disgusting you couldn't bring yourself to do it. And that's how strong the disgust reflex is, that it can literally override our reason and be and permanently prevent us from engaging in a behavior. So the biological origin and purpose of the disgust facial expression and reflex is to cause us to reject and eject potentially harmful items before they cause ill health, and then to rapidly transfer that learned avoidance behavior to the larger social group. So in other words, if we are out in our environment and we're walking together and you see your friend pick up something that looks like it might be good to eat, and they bite into it, and all of a sudden they get this horrible, disgusted look on their face, and they spit it out and they go, "It's horrible." You don't feel the need to go and pick that same item up and put it in your mouth because you can tell from their reaction and facial expression that that is not something you should even attempt to eat. So from their reaction, from their facial expression, you have been protected from being potentially exposed to something that could harm your health. Well, it turns out that there are actually three domains of disgust. Current theories argue that the emotion of disgust has three functional domains. There is pathogen disgust, which is the subject of this lecture, but importantly, there's also moral disgust and sexual disgust. I'm taking a quick drink of water. Again, pathogen disgust is the principal subject of this lecture and primarily concerns itself with protecting both the individual and our social group from agents or behaviors that represent a proximal and imminent threat to life, limb, or health, and possibly social order. Moral disgust pertains to social transgressions and antisocial behaviors, such as lying, stealing, cheating, meanness, cruelty, and violence towards others. I might also add social insurrection and attempting to overthrow one's own government. The anti-cruelty and violence aspects of moral disgust will also be addressed to some extent in this lecture, but you can quickly understand that moral disgust is critically important for any social dwelling organism or species, because if you don't have rules and some sort of code of behavior that limits your aggressive activities towards your the individuals that you share living space with, you could quickly end up killing each other and destroying your social cohesiveness. Sexual disgust concerns itself with the avoidance of unfavorable sexual pairings that could ultimately result in less viable offspring and end up causing the social group to die out from becoming weakened genetically and thus subject to, infectious agents that could kill off everybody else. So things like incest, or that sick feeling you get when you used to see Hugh Hefner with some, 20-year-old bimbo, or when you would see, I don't know, Donald Trump with Marla Maples or someone. That is sexual disgust. Pedophilia, that the disgust we feel when we see very old persons with very young persons, that there's something that tells you that is not appropriate, and that is where the sexual disgust comes from. So clearly there is wide personal and cultural variation in what is found to be disgusting. As previously discussed not only encompasses dietary issues, but it also has a very strong social and moral component. And again, my personal list of what I find disgusting are people who are racist and the people who tolerate and excuse them, people who rip away children from their parents and put them in cages, and then try to claim that such behavior is consistent with the teachings of Jesus Christ, or biblical provisions for taking care of strangers, and anyone who engages in anti-democratic tactics in an attempt to keep a lawless, orange-colored criminal in the White House, and try to put in place laws that deny citizens the right to vote to, again, keep neo-fascists in office. Those are things I personally find very disgusting. But studies have shown that there are elicitors of pathogen disgust that are consistent across cultures. So, again, there are certain behaviors that may be found disgusting in one culture or in one household that, in another culture or another household aren't found disgusting. But interestingly, studies have shown that there are certain things that in every culture looked at around the globe, these same issues or features, all human beings tend to find disgusting. And what are those features? Well, the qualities are things that are found disgusting across most or all cultures around the world, are things that are moist or slimy, wet, things that have a soft, sticky, greasy, or oily quality to them, things that are squishy, putrid, or foul, things that have a very asymmetric or amorphous shape, things covered with flies, things that are bloody, things that are decaying or rotting, things that have animal effluent in them or around them, things covered with hair or fur, things that are gory or covered with worms or maggots, indicating that they are rotting and decaying. And I remember once when I was giving this lecture, a woman raised her hand and she said, "Well, Dr. Mills, I don't think hair is disgusting." I said, "Okay, let me bring you a bowl of soup and I'll put a great big hair in it and we'll see if you find that appetizing." And so clearly she got the point that yes, when it comes to things that we are going to ingest, human beings do not want them covered with hair and fur. And I think if you just step back and look at this list, it should start to become clear to you that what this list is describing is unprocessed raw animal tissue, largely, and certainly animal tissue that has been left to start the decay process. And it's letting you know that our brains are trying to tell us we shouldn't be ingesting unprocessed animal tissue. But let's go ahead and move on.